So today I'm joined by Jacqueline Wolfheart, a PhD in psychology, and
Yep.
you sent me a message that grabbed my attention. You deal with children who have been sex trafficked, and you deal with children's psychology and trauma, and that's obviously a big subject to touch on. And you had a couple other interesting facts about yourself. I'm just going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself if you don't mind.
Hi again. I'm Jacqueline Wolfheart or Dr. Wolfheart. I usually avoid the doctor. It makes me sound snooty, I think. But Jacqueline Wolfheart, yeah, I work with not exclusively, but mostly as my psychology profession. I do work with children who have been sex trafficking victims. I have other ventures as well. I've had a fun, awesome, crazy life, some really highs, some really lows, and I feel like it's really well balanced. Unfortunately, it's really well balanced and not leading to the highs all the time. But yeah, I'm a mom. I have a guinea pig sanctuary. I just have a lot of crazy, awesome, fun things. And yeah, I guess that's the short of me. Yeah.
That's awesome. It keeps it interesting having a lot of different ventures to occupy your time. I'm just going to throw out a couple of things. I've done a little bit of research on you. You're pretty under the radar, except for when it comes to Wolf Media that you're working on. And that's a film festival. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're branching it further. So when I first started working for them, they were just a film festival. And um, so I had made a movie that won at the festival. I asked, can I work for you since my last name is Wolfheart? I
Yeah.
worked there for about 2 weeks before they told me they're actually going to end the festival. It's just not bringing in a lot of money. And I said, can I buy it from you?
Wow.
So we're working on that, but we're going to expand it, or we've already expanded it beyond films. So we do take photography, podcasts, even writings of all types. So yeah, we got a whole bunch of new things, and I hope we just keep expanding as we grow. That'll be awesome.
So I listened to a previous podcast about you, and you kind of started detailing a little bit of your life and your experiences and everything. And I'm just kind of curious if you could touch on how you were raised, and then if that was what led you into your current profession.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't necessarily say how I was raised, but things
Yeah.
that happened to me for sure
Yeah.
led to my current job. When I was very little, well, first of all, I'll start off by saying that I am the second child to teenage parents. So they were babies when they had my older brother, and they were still babies when they had me. So I don't really fault them for some of the traumas I went through, but other traumas, I'm like, come on, you should have known better. Even
Yeah.
me as like a 10-year-old would have known better. You as
Yeah.
a 18-year-old should have known better. Still, I think some of the things that happened to me and my older brother that my parents are still kind of clueless about. But I don't know so much that that's what originally led me to where I'm at. I mean, it took me a while to get to this path. I wanted to be a superhero. I wanted to be a veterinarian for years and years. I think most of my family thought that's what I would grow up to be, was a veterinarian. Then I started wanting to work with kids, feeling that kids love me so much, they trust me so much. I'm a good person for that. So I thought the only job I could think that you work with kids is something like a pediatrician.
Yeah.
So I started going to medical school originally, and I didn't last long, not because the work was challenging, but because most of the jobs I could get with that was working with the elder, which was
Hmm.
fine, but they die on you, and my
Yeah.
heart can't my heart can't take that. So I switched gears. I was also working on my own traumas. And as I was figuring out ways to heal myself, I thought I can help other people who've gone through what I've gone through. And so it led me into psychology that way. Yeah, and it's been kind of amazing. I was trafficked as a
Wow.
child. I don't think that my parents, still to this day, although they know what happened in their brains, I don't think they think of it as trafficking.
Mhm.
Actually, I think if my mom heard me use that term for what me and my brother went through, I think that would break her heart even more. Although she already knows what we went through, but
Yeah.
that's a very hard term to hear.
This is rampant throughout the United States and across the world. And I am like, I don't trust anybody to watch my kids. You're always like worried about their safety. Is there any kind of advice you would give, or is it just roll the dice and hope for the best?
Yeah, well, it's really, as far as that goes, sadly, your family and friends is who you need to watch out for when it comes to sexual abuse. Those are the people who do it the most. But that isn't necessarily going to be who's trafficking you. Although I've had many clients who were trafficked by family members, and it's always blown my mind since I've started working in Florida how many of those family members were the grandma. That, to me, I
Wow.
still can't wrap my head around the grandma.
Yeah.
Like, you never see the grandma as the one. You have to really build your own children up to know how to protect themselves and to feel safe around coming to you. As a parent, you can't really shelter them from everything in the world, but if something does happen, are you a safe enough parent that they can come to you, that you can
And
kind of correct the bad thing?
do you talk to your children obviously about this beforehand, but how would you approach that? Because you don't want to just start throwing out there, don't, you can't trust anybody and you don't want to scar them. So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, you definitely like so how I phrased it of like don't trust anybody, like you don't actually verbally approach it that way,
yeah,
but you do want to have I know this is like a lot of parents hear like the terms of sexual education in school that scares
yeah,
them. We shouldn't be teaching our kids about sex. That's not what sex education is. It's
yeah,
about knowing your own body and I mean like telling your child to put on deodorant is part of sex education, and every
yeah,
kid needs to know that, right?
yeah,
Or washing yourself. But letting your kids know about their own body is a great way to start teaching them what's okay and what's not okay. Um, and what like a hug is an appropriate touch, but how many parents do you see tell their kid, "Go give them a hug before we leave." Don't be forcing your kids to give appropriate, touches or accept appropriate touches because just because it seems appropriate doesn't mean it feels comfortable. And
yeah.
if they can't build that comfort first, then it's not an appropriate touch yet. So yeah, really starting your kid, building them like with these little micro things like that, just knowing what a good touch is or do you feel comfortable with that touch is a good starting place. And then knowing that there's a limit because some sexual touches do feel good even as a child.
Yeah.
But so how do you teach your kid that? That's the harder part. But it's knowing that these are not appropriate. Even though it feels good, it's not appropriate because it's not healthy for you. And to a smaller child, it's comparing not healthy more to the physical of it, there's germs, it can hurt your heart, it could, all these terms that they can understand better. As they grow, you you share more and really
Yeah.
sadly it does break your brain. It makes your brain neuron like going way deep into it. It really reforms your neurons. And that
Yes.
could even be 2 15-year-olds making out with each other. That seems like a thing that 15-year-olds might want to explore, but that can really actually cause a lot of damage to their neurons. And we just don't think about it. We just think like, oh, that's innocent, oh, puppy love or whatever.
Yeah.
But so you got to teach them the healthy, slow, do things slow, progress slowly with and you gotta do it at the same time while not shaming them. That's the second part is don't shame them for it, like, we've all felt that way before too, we might have experienced it, and there's nothing wrong with feeling that way, but do it slow, do it where it's, nobody's uncomfortable, the whole time you're feeling happy and positive about it. Yeah, it's a really tough cycle that I think in this conversation, we wouldn't be able to cover everything
No,
with.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
My son just started kindergarten. And so now he's surrounded by all these people I don't know. And I want to have this conversation with them, but I'm like, I, I don't want to come off weird to my own son, like talking to him about these things. So maybe I'll leave that to his mom. But do you have any like books? You wrote a book. Is it based on this or is it something else? Or do you have any
Yeah, no, I
recommendations?
I I do have a book, but it's not about this particularly. It's about more like overcoming anxiety is my book, but it's a children's book, very, very non-direct ways
Yeah.
to handle your anxiety and feeling brave. So, yeah, not necessarily about this. There's quite a few books I've looked into and they're great, and then there's some that I've looked into and I don't agree with them
Yeah.
necessarily, but off the top of my head, I can't think of any titles. I wish I would have,
No
like, looked
problems.
that up sooner, but,
I didn't mean to put you
um
on the spot.
yeah, no worries. There are some great ones out there, and anything that's teaching your kids about their own self-control or their own like, controlling their own body, I think that's a good probably a good start to go with, just in general.
So, clients or children that come to you, how are most children introduced into getting the help that they need? Is it through the state? Is it a parent finds out? Because they're obviously not going to come there on their own accord. Uh,
Surprisingly, they do
really?
sometimes. I would say a good chunk of time, maybe 30% of the time, they're going to
Oh,
come
wow.
to me. And I've also been lucky enough to be in positions where I'm easy access to kids who might need me. So that's a harder thing to get yourself accessible to kids. I work in schools. I kind of travel between schools, which is most psychologists don't have that. They have an office, and a kid's
Yeah.
not going to go to an office and be like, hey, can I talk to you? But when I'm just coming to your school once a week or a
Oh,
couple
wow.
hours a week, yeah, I'm free range for multiple schools in my area.
I was homeschooled, so I don't know all the programs that there are, but having a children's psychologist, and are most of the people you're dealing with, are they like little kids, 5, 6, 7? Or are they teens or the whole spectrum?
It's a whole spectrum. I do have some adults too, but most of the adults are still young, or maybe they started with me as a teen and they're adults. Yeah, I actually homeschool my youngest as well. What I do is actually pretty rare. It's not like a lot of districts don't have. I just got really lucky that schools were like, "Oh, you sound awesome. Come in." That's super rare for my state. I live in Florida, and you're not going to find that very often. But I've lived in other states too, and it's just not really a thing that they allow.
It sounds like it should be a thing. I mean, they should
Yeah.
have that in every school or at least district, you know.
Yeah, mine's my whole county, so I can go to pretty much any school in the county. The company I started with, kids need this, and it got my foot in the door. But yeah, it's mostly school districts preventing it for whatever reason, and it's not really taking money from the funds of the school. So I'm not sure why it's a battle, but that's multiple
I would
states. Not just this state that I live in
for
though, too.
sure.
It's like every state I've been in, they're kind of just like, yeah, let's not do that. And I don't know why. So
Like
it's
they want to push it under the rug, kind of.
yeah, I plus we're there, like, these teachers need the support from
Absolutely.
these kids who are dealing with these emotional battles, and I'm like, we're here to help the teachers too, so it's like a win-win. I'm not sure why they're blocking it so much.
Well, maybe that should be your next adventure, is creating a program to help bring this to schools, because I think that would be a huge win for children and parents.
No, but actually, I didn't answer part of your question. One of your questions earlier is my age range is a giant age range, and most of the teenagers who came to me actually were. This is a thing that makes me very angry. Most of them came to me because they have been labeled criminals
Yep.
or being trafficked, or maybe they were being trafficked and did commit a crime for their own well-being, got caught, and so they were court ordered to me.
How are
Kids.
most kids trafficked? I mean, you said, family members and stuff like that, but I mean, the term traffic, some people think, they're thrown in a van and driven across the country into some flop house and never heard from again. I know that happens, but is that the norm, or what is kind of your average trafficking
So
situation?
yeah, with friends and family, that's typically just sexual abuse, which is its own thing. Trafficking is when one person is giving you to many people or traveling with you to provide you to other people. In my case, it was my mom's second husband, and he brought people to do things to me and my brother. And then at one point he took, which my mom was young, and she thought it would be easy while he's on his road trip. He pretended to be a truck driver. He bought a semi or rented a semi even, pretended, oh, I have this long haul I got to do. And he took me state to state and sold me at truck stops. I was very young. I was 4, 5, and 6 years old. I was a baby still. My brother didn't go across state lines. I apologize in advance to my brother for bringing it up, but his was all done at home. And I think even a lot more secretly, because he's a more shy person, as where I'm a more vocal person. Even growing up, boys are treated a lot different if they bring this up. And not that girls are treated well if they're brought it up, but boys it's almost something to brag adult men want to tell little boys like, "Oh, lucky you," kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's not lucky you at all.
No. Was he
Yeah.
ever brought to justice for this?
He was, for me and my brother's case, not not exactly. Once my mom actually, like, got hip to realizing what was truly actually happening, she did the hard, smart thing of picking up the family and getting the F out of there.
Yep.
And she let him know, "I know what you did. I've reported you to the police." And he split town. And they said, "Oh, he's not in the state anymore. We can't do
Yeah.
anything." But
Typical.
then he did get caught in another state with another child. I think she was about my same age. And so he did some prison time for that. And after that, I don't really know what the deal is.
That makes me sick to my stomach. I watched that movie recently. I'm sure you've probably seen it, about sex trafficking and rescuing the children down in, I think, South America. And my mind, I don't remember the name of it. Y- You guys did a film on sex trafficking?
Yeah, I have a film made. 4 of my clients who are adults now, but started with me as teens, wanted to first they talked about maybe could we write a book or something to share their stories, and we decided to make a movie about it. And so we kind of turned all of their stories into one person's story for our film. We were aiming to make it a horror film, and it is horrific, but I don't think by traditional means it comes off as a horror film. If anybody, it's called Abduction Chronicles, but if anybody watches it, I say watch it with like heavy trigger warnings. It is brutal. We filmed it as a found footage, so everything looks real. It
Oh,
hits on, yeah, so it hits, and my actors, the people we found to do it, most of them were victims at some point in their lives of some form of trafficking, kidnapping. Even the people who played the bad guys were people who had gone through this, and they were all amazing. I would recommend every one of them to be in every film ever. They were so amazing, such hard workers, very realistic. Everything about it was phenomenal. But it is a hard film to watch. So like I most people are saying like, please go watch my movie. Please go watch my movie. I'm saying unless you're like trying to write a report on something like
yeah.
this, probably don't watch this movie.
Okay.
Yeah, it's dark and it's deep and it's pretty brutal, but it hits on different ways that people do get trafficked. A really common method of trying to traffic people in Florida, which is very heavily trafficked because we live on a coastline, makes it
Yep.
easier, is they find a attractive male, maybe mid-20s, early 30s, that a young girl will feel not privileged, but he's gonna flirt with her and she's gonna feel good about it.
Yep.
So, like, "Oh, you know, I feel so mature that this older man is into me." He's gonna do something like invite her to a party. She's gonna convince her friends, "Let's go to this hot guy's party." Goes to the party, they get drugged, something along those lines. They might not even get drugged. They're gonna be sexually assaulted there. They're gonna be sold there. That person who invited them to the party literally never had to lift a finger to get them involved. He got his money. He's out free. He didn't touch them. Anything bad that came from them was, their own fault, air quote, because they came to that party. They ingested the alcohol, whatever. So that's a really common method in these coastal
I just,
states.
I just keep thinking Jeffrey Epstein. And are you familiar with that situation in Florida and that whole?
His is probably a bigger deal than, like, he's got so much money and he's flying people to, or he had so much money flying
Yeah.
people to somewhere. But there's like very small operations that you would never think this is going to be a bad thing. It's a party with only 25 people there. And it's, just, like, I just feel so special that they asked us to come too. And it's just a casual pool party. So you're
Yeah.
really your guard is very down, and they're not forcing you. They're not pressuring you. They're just being like, "Oh my gosh, you're so beautiful. And I really love talking to you." And that kind of, they're
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
building you up where you're like, "Oh my God, I'm so mature. This guy must really like me." Trying to think of some other, but that's a really common method in the coastal states for sure. And because we're coastal, it's so easy to just take them somewhere else. Waters are
Yeah.
free range to get people in and out. take that water
So,
route.
so the people that you're obviously dealing with younger children, but I just recently learned of a relative that was, sexually abused. He wasn't trafficked, but I mean, he's been carrying that, and I know so many guys or and girls have been carrying this around forever, and they don't tell anybody, and it just eats at them and eats at them. How do you start to heal yourself as a person who's experienced these things? Obviously, it wasn't your fault, but a lot of these people carry it around with them that they believe it, they had something to do with it. Like, how do you start treating that person?
First thing first is like they have to want to get the treatment. And I know that sounds weird when you're like, well, obviously they don't want to be hurting, but sometimes you get so used to it that it's uncomfortable to not hurt anymore. So they have to really want it first thing. They have to be open to talking about it, maybe not necessarily the specifics of it. Like, you don't have to tell me the exact thing that a person did to you for me to talk with you about the things that happened to you. And then from there, we devise all sorts of different plans. Thankfully, kids is a lot easier to work with than adults because an adult who's been carrying that around for, you know, 10, 15, 20, 25 years, you're looking at like 3 to 4 times longer work to reroute everything that you've been living through that whole time. And again, going back, it sounds like it was a male cousin of yours or a male family member who was abused.
Yeah,
It's
he's a relative of mine, not a sibling, but just a relative. Yeah,
yeah.
and terrible. And I'm kind of curious. So me recently in December, I didn't have any sexual trauma growing up, but I had other things, and I'm also a veteran and have had all kinds of mental health challenges. And my thought is, so I went down to Costa Rica and did ayahuasca in December, and I mean, it was completely life changing and healing for me, and kind of set me on this whole path I'm on right now, trying to help other people. Do you have any kind of experience, or I know they're using psychedelics for treatment in mental health. Have you researched that at all, or do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I've been so interested in it. I'm not a huge fan of medications, but I'm not
Yeah,
anti-med either. I just feel like too many people jump to it too quickly and then they stick with it too long. That's where I'm at with it. But I think it's wonderful. I think it's great. And if you need it, please take it. It's better
for
than
sure.
not doing anything. But these natural things, especially the shroom microdosing, has fascinated me. I personally have never tried it. I've always lived an alcohol, drug-free life.
Good for you.
I don't know why, because if you met me, you would not think that I have been that, because I've had a very cool life and I'm pretty eccentric, I think, at times. So you would never believe if I'm like, no, I just don't drink. I just don't do drugs.
Uh,
You're like, are you sure?
yeah,
It's just
that's amazing.
me. But yeah, especially with the mushrooms and the microdosing, that has fascinated me. I've only seen positive study after positive study after positive study. Now, because it's not something that's legal or properly monitored, I'm not gonna go recommend it to people yet, but I am like, please, let's get to that point where it is properly monitored so that we can do that. The long-term benefits for such a short amount of microdosing, they're microdosing for a week to 4 weeks and then decades and decades of positive changes. And
Yes.
that would be amazing. Could you imagine if it took you 4 weeks to make your life be the best thing forever? Like, that's amazing.
So the place that I went is called Rhythmia. It's in Costa Rica. It's a licensed, medically facilitated ayahuasca retreat, and they have doctors and psychologists and the whole nine yards. But you do 4 nights of ceremony. This person I was talking to you about in my family, I went in December, and he saw such a positive impact, and he had never told me anything about his past. And after I wrote my whole story out every night and every experience, and he read that, and after he's like, I want to do this. So he went down there, and I mean, the healing, his experience from that, I mean, this guy was carrying this around and just ruling his life. And I mean, 4 days of ayahuasca ceremonies, and he, months later, I'm talking to him, and he's like, it's changed his life and he's helping other people. So I really have high hopes for it. I definitely don't think you should go hang out in, your friend's backyard and
Yeah.
take DMT or mushrooms or anything like that. But this place is super legit and it's helped so many people. So I would look into it if I was you. If you've never experienced any drugs, I don't know if I'd jump right to ayahuasca, but it's incredible stuff. You said you had kind of a cool upbringing, a little bit of like I heard, and we don't have to get into it too much, but one cool thing about you is you worked for Linkin Park as their personal assistant for 6 years. And that's a pretty awesome story.
I'd say most of it's pretty boring.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was pretty boring. But yeah, it was so many great memories from that time in my life. We would be a couple months on tour, then I'd have a couple weeks to a couple months off, and another tour would start. And so it was just like that cycle. And as I think I was 19 or 20 when I started. I didn't know that was the band I was applying for. In fact, I don't think I even knew I was applying to be an assistant for a band, if I remember right. And I was living in Washington State right now. They're
Yeah.
California based. So I never thought, and what it turned out to be versus I just thought I was going to be like like in an office. And, like that's what I was thinking I was getting
Yeah.
into, but I needed a job. And I was going to college at the time too. And then it was like they picked me. It was over the summer, which kind of worked out great for school. And it was that band. And they were already big at that time. So that was 2002, I think I started working with them, maybe the end of 2001. So they were already big right there. I think In the End had just come out, which was on it was on pop stations, rock station,
Oh,
all
yeah.
over. So they were already big at that time. And then I started working with them. Daydream. Every day was a daydream. I was
Yeah.
like,
That's
this
like
is,
winning the lottery for a young teen or early 20s. And
yeah.
I mean, so being around those people, you say you don't do drugs, you don't drink. I don't
Mhm.
actually know much about them. I know their music, but them personally, were you kind of surrounded by that? It's the rock star life, and if you were, how do you stay out of that?
Yeah. So another thing, being a girl already in a man's world, because most of the other bands we toured with too were all dudes. Being young, being somebody who was like already so much afraid of men in general, it was like kind of a scary, potentially scary thing.
Yeah.
I never felt unsafe with them. It was like having big brothers around all the time. They're not really themselves, at least at that time, weren't too big of a partiers anyways, not to say that they never drank. I never saw drug use. Very rarely do I remember alcohol being a thing, but I also remember getting teased a bit that I didn't drink. It's not that I have never drank an alcohol before.
Okay.
It's just a thing less than 1 beer a year is how
Wow.
much I've consumed in my life. So
Wow.
I have consumed it. It's just a rare, very rare thing. But yeah, so they would tease sometimes that I wasn't drinking or like I should be taking advantage. And most of the time I would come back with, well, I'm not 21 yet. And it was, again, it's not them trying to pressure me into
Sure.
it. It's the whole everybody, all the road crew, other bands, fans galore. Like, why aren't, and I'm just like, I'm on the clock right now. Like, always the lamest excuses for
Okay.
why this 19-year-old, 20-year-old isn't drinking yet. But
Pretty
yeah,
good.
it
That's
wasn't.
some self-control, like big time. That's
I think
amazing.
honestly, I think I had two big fears. Was one, getting raped because I'm, too drunk to fight something off, or because
Yep.
I led somebody on because I'm
Yep.
not in my right mind. And another super weird fear I had was that I was allergic to drugs and that I would, smoke weed or use something, I would have an allergic reaction. I would go to the hospital and then I'd get arrested. I don't know why. I'd never seen that happen to anybody ever, but that was a legit fear I had. So I just was like, I don't want to risk it. So
That's perfect.
yeah, I'd say, but no, they were great and beautiful souls. There was a lot of charity work done while working with them, like leading different charities and organizations, and that was like such a great thing for the type of person I am, to be around people who like to do that for fun.
Yeah.
But they were also, although they're not much older than me, maybe 5 to 8 years older than me, they were very immature. I will say there was a
Yeah.
lot of like young boy mentality sometimes when they're adults already. But fun, very delightful guys, all of them. very smart, obviously very talented, or they
Yes.
wouldn't have gotten how they gotten. And they were a huge part. My best friend, I met her through working. She lived in Alabama when she was hired. She was hired, I think she was only 16.
Oh
So
my
she was only
gosh.
allowed to work certain concerts. She wasn't allowed to travel out of the country and things like that. And she couldn't work as many as she couldn't do long road trips. It was, I think, something about child labor laws, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I
So
would
she wasn't
imagine
allowed.
she's 16.
Yeah. So
That-
she was about 3 or 4 years younger than me, but she was my best friend for decades and decades. She passed away about 6 years ago from medical health issues, but I just feel like for me to find, no offense to my husband, but she was such my soulmate,
yeah.
and I found her through getting to work with them. And I don't think I would have ever, like, why would I ever be able to meet her otherwise? And yeah,
It's the
and
universe bringing you together. I kind of believe in
yeah,
that. You
yeah.
never
And
know
so,
who's going to
yeah,
pop into your life, and it's incredible.
it is so incredible, and she was such a beautiful soul, and I miss her every day. But yeah, they brought me to her. I think that unknowingly they led me into so many different paths, and I just only have good, positive. I mean, other than Chester passing away also about 7 years ago, I only have good, positive things to say. My kids are named after. I have a son named Lincoln. I
Oh
have a
my
son
gosh.
who
Wow.
one of my oldest son, his initials are LP, like Linkin Park LP. My mom actually tried to get me to name my first son Lincoln, and I was like, he doesn't feel like a Lincoln, but he does feel like a Linkin Park.
I
So
love
I
it.
gave him the initials of LP, and then we got to go on a, not working with them, but we got to tour with them a little bit just as like friends or guests of them a couple times. So my two oldest children did also get to meet them before Chester's passing.
Oh man.
And
That's
yeah, the
that's
heartache
awesome.
from my son who's named Lincoln, that was such a tragic day when I mean, for the whole world, for his family especially, but my son found out they announced it on the radio, and just that he was 6 or 7 at the time, and I remember like, so quickly moving to turn the radio off and thinking, "Okay, he probably didn't even comprehend what they were saying," but for him, he got it right away,
Oh,
instant tear shed, like, heartbreak. I still feel to this day he's heartbroken about it, and he only had met him 3 or 4 times, he was,
wow. He's named
he
after the guy. That
but Chester was an amazing, amazing soul. I mean, all the guys from Linkin Park who were, I don't know, there's new members now, they just restarted getting new songs out there and stuff, and I wish them the best, but I just don't know them anymore, it's been a while.
not the same.
But yeah, I mean, I hope they are because they were just the most lovely, beautiful people that you would never think of a rock band being. But yeah, they were just lovely, lovely, beautiful people, and yeah, I have so many great memories, and all of it feeling safe and feeling included. And I think that too for different races, different social identities, like, this is one of the few bands I can see where you got your pop princesses coming in, you got your heavy metalers coming, just like it was really this beautiful melting pot of different types of people coming together. And yeah, it was such a good time for me. Don't
That's
regret a
incredible.
second of it. Yeah.
So I did want to touch, if you want to talk about it, about your kind of medical condition.
So I have multiple sclerosis, and I do have a seizure disorder. So I wasn't self-diagnosed, but I can tell you before I was diagnosed, I diagnosed myself every night as tonight's my last night. I thought I
Wow.
was gonna not wake up the next morning. And I was a single for my 2 older children. I was a single mom for 14 years. And when I say single mom, I don't mean I had friends and family helping me out. I mean, I was 100% on my own. And every day, this was 2012, I think. Every day I'd wake up and a different part of me was failing. Fingers not working, eventually legs not working, going to doctor after doctor. Again, single mom, not making a lot of money at that time, no medical insurance. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, but if you don't get child support, you don't qualify for state assistance. So
Wow.
it's
What if you
so
don't
it's a
know who the
dumb.
father is? Because I know that is a thing
Yes.
sometimes.
So my kid, we do know who the father is of my kid. It just felt for me, that's a whole different trauma right there. He's not He was never verbally, physically abusive or anything like that, but I found out I was his side piece.
Oh,
He was married and I was the other woman for years and I had no idea.
wow.
And yeah, the second I found out, it was just like, peace out. The whole world is fake to me. I don't want to see you
Yeah.
ever again. And that's when I was pregnant with my second. I
Oh
don't
my
think I even
gosh.
knew I was pregnant yet. So it was just like, bye. And that was it. I just didn't need him anymore. But
Was he a traveling guy, or how did he pull that off? That seems
yeah,
like a pretty
airline
convenient
pilot.
route.
Yeah,
Okay,
airline
yeah.
pilot.
That's a good
Yeah.
cover story there.
Yeah, I mean, he's been randomly in the kid's life for the last so my oldest is 18 and then our second child together is just turned 17. They're doing great, both in college right now, both graduated high school last year, both in college. And their dad's been randomly in their life for the last 4 or so years. He comes about once or twice a year to visit. He's very nice, but I do think his new wife is part of why he's
Good. Good for
decided to
her.
pop in. Oh, she's the most wonderful thing to happen to the planet. She's so lovely. I love her so much.
Okay.
I told him, like, if their dad, I said, if it doesn't work out with her, can you just send her my way? Like, I would love to have her as my family because
Yes.
she's such a lovely person. And they just had a baby together too, maybe 3 months ago. Such a cute baby. Like, I'm so happy. I really hope that like I said, he's always been a nice guy. And
Yeah.
so I don't wish bad for him at all or anything.
Oh,
But anyways, that's yeah. So here I was, this single mom, 100% on my own with my kids. I mean, I didn't even have daycare. My jobs were my kids come to work with me. And my legs started failing. Eventually I had my 7 and 5-year-old were bathing me, taking me to the bathroom. They were the only help I had. Well, I had a friend, Hilda. She's other side of the country,
Hilda,
but
good
I
job.
think, yeah, love her so much. She would come and take me to doctor's appointments, but she has her own family. Not that I mean, she wanted to be there 100% for sure, but it was like, girl, take care of yourself and your family too, you know?
Yeah.
But she would take me to my doctor's appointments. So I appreciate that so much. But for the most part, it was my kids raising me all of a sudden. My babies were having to take care of me full time. And doctor's appointments, they were not finding what was wrong. And I even had one doctor tell me that I'm making it up. Was 28. How old was I? I feel like I was 28, but that doesn't line up with how old my kids were. So I must have been like 30. Maybe I was 30
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
But you could literally do like the stab tests in my feet and there's no reaction. There, like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm making up that I can't feel you stabbing me. Um, yeah, so but eventually it went this round. They did MRIs, but they were just doing my brain at the time. And MS typically only attacks your brain, but it can also attack your spine. And finally, they took me to an eye doctor because one of my biggest complaints were my eyes were constantly shaking. Like, that's just a weird, like, I've never heard of somebody just your eyes just randomly shake, right?
Yeah.
But everything else is fine. I can talk and I can see, that sounds like a seizure or something
Yeah.
crazy.
Yep.
So they sent me to an eye doctor. And how do you can't make your eyes shake, can you? I don't know. Anyways,
No.
but I was faking it to that one doctor. But they sent me to an eye doctor, a neuro-ophthalmologist. And she ran a bunch of tests. And even she was like, I don't know what's wrong. And she's like, but we have one more test, but the machine's down and maybe we can reschedule, but I just don't know what to tell you. I was like, okay, well, go pay my fee. As I'm leaving, she runs out and she's like, the machine's working, come back
Oh, wow.
in. So I go back in, she does this test and she said, oh my God, you have white matter disease. And I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I'm like, oh my God, what is that? That's horrible. But
Yeah.
that's like an umbrella term for a lot. Even a migraine can fall under white matter disease. Dementia can fall under white matter disease, but I don't think Alzheimer's does. But it's an umbrella term for a lot of neurological issues. So I go home, I research that. She sends me back to get a brain MRI, but this time they do my spine as well. And the first time they did the MRI was just about to here, layer, viewing down to my jawline for anybody who's only listening and not watching,
Yeah.
to about my jawline. Well, my scars, multiple sclerosis is you have scars on your neurons. So my scars started in my neck, and went down my spine. And that's when they first started. So they decided, let's go down her whole spine. Found out I had 4 in my spine, starting at my neck, and then like kind of like every 10 inches down, I had another scar, which is very scary. In your spine, you only have 10 pathways for your neurons to lead. When 4 of those are scarred up, you're kind of, that's why your whole body's failing. In your brain, you have millions of pathways, but even one of those getting scarred up could be a neuron pathway you're using a lot. So if it gets scarred up, maybe you can't use your hand anymore, but your brain is constantly making new pathways. So
Hmm.
eventually somebody might be able to get over, my hand wasn't working. Well, now my brain made a new pathway and my hand works again.
Yep.
Thankfully for me, I got on medication. It was $65,000 a year for that
Wow.
medication. So again, single mom, I think I was making $11 an hour at the time.
Oh my
I
God.
got a grant to help cover. Yeah, it was like a weird term, but it was basically a grant that helped covered a lot of my medication costs. And there is no cure. Medicine doesn't stop it. It just slows it down. They thought there's different types of multiple sclerosis. They thought I can't think of what it's called right now, but there's one kind where you just get worse. That's
Yeah.
what they thought I had at first. Thankfully, eventually they found out I have relapsing remitting. So it's you get bad, you get good, you get bad, you get good. There's one where you get bad, you get bad, you get bad. There's one where you get bad, you get a little bit better, you get a lot worse, you get a little, so you're kind of
Yeah.
still in a downward, but you have good moments still. Mine is just kind of, I get bad, I go back to my same good, I go back to my same bad. Um,
Not that you
yeah,
want that diagnosis at all, but if you're
yeah.
gonna have it, you got, I guess, the
I
best.
guess, yeah, I got lucky with the one I got. So my grandmother, my mom's mom, also had multiple sclerosis. And I had heard the term, but growing up, I thought that meant you had like brittle bones because
Okay.
the only thing anybody had ever talked about was like worry about grandma falling. And so in my brain, it was like, we don't want her to fall because her brittle bones will break. So yeah, when they told me I had it, I was like, no, like my bones are healthy.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like complete,
Uh,
like that doesn't make sense to what I think it is. But yeah, so I started having good moments and every once in a while I still have bad moments, but that led me to Florida. There's been a lot of studies show that if you live closer to the equator, symptoms are less frequent and are shorter your flare-ups are shorter when they happen. So we
or
moved.
why? I mean, I would move there too, but I wonder what the science is behind that.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing because there isn't too much science. Because just because my grandma had it doesn't mean
Yeah.
that I was more likely to get it. Like, there's not necessarily a family connection. There's not like environmental connections, although there was just enough studies to say live closer to the equator, things will be better. And I will say
Perfect.
it was, yeah. We moved down here, and that first year I lived here was, oh man, I felt like a superhero then. Like I had
Yeah.
so much power, like all of a sudden I can do things again. Now what am I, like 8 years into living here? I'm not feeling powerful all the time, but
Yeah.
I can tell when I fly back northwest, that I do feel worse there. So we live here despite its ups and downs. We live here.
Yeah. Are
And
you in the coastal area, or are you kind of
yeah,
inland?
I'm central, but very east. I'm 5 minutes from the beach, so
Okay.
it's lovely. Hurricanes are a thing in my neighborhood. Again, I'm so blessed. My town will get destroyed, and my neighborhood, since I've lived here, has never nothing.
I'm
I'm
gonna
like,
knock on my desk for you.
thank you. Yeah, we had a tornado this last hurricane that came through. There was tornadoes like crazy tearing up buildings next to us. We can hear the buildings getting destroyed. Nothing in my neighborhood. And my
Wow.
neighborhood is just a block long. We just live in a very small neighborhood. Nothing. I don't know how. We're just so lucky and so blessed. I hate using those terms like lucky and blessed, like we deserve it and we did something better, but
Yeah.
really all I can think is that we
You're
did luck out.
lucky and
We moved
blessed.
here. Yeah, lucky and blessed. We definitely don't deserve it any more than anybody else, but somehow we lucked out. I've had these bad things, but all these amazing blessings keep coming that I'm just so grateful for. And this is one of those.
Gra-
It's
Gratitude's the
amazing.
key. We
Yeah.
forget about
Yeah.
it.
I,
Gratitude is like the answer to so many problems, being thankful for what you have and just,
Yeah, yeah.
the blessings we
We've
have.
been
But
I've been working with my 6-year-old a lot on that. He kind of does have a naturally negative thinking mind. I think my 17-year-old also, but he's, like, trained himself to vocally you don't realize that his brain is
yeah,
negative thinking.
yeah.
But my 6-year-old, he will just say, think the things along like, "Well, that's not fair." I never get to, like, those statements. So we've been working on that, and I've been doing, like, like, "It's bedtime." "Well, I wanna stay up longer." "Well, you could have gone to bed 30 minutes ago like you were supposed to, or we can do the now." Like, working on that, but he'll throw it back to me sometimes, and I'll be like, "Son, you were told you can only have 2 pieces of candy. Why did you eat 5?" And he'll be like, "But mom, I could have eaten 6."
Oh, yeah,
That's
reverse
because
psychology.
yeah, I'm like, "All right, well, that is true, but still you knew better." Like, but I think he's getting the idea, but quit using it against me, you know?
Yeah, I love it. So you have a guinea pig rescue?
Sanctuary. Yeah, yeah, we have a
Sanctuary.
skinny so ours what makes us a little bit different than a normal animal rescue is that if they come to us, they stay with us. We
Okay.
don't breed and we don't rehome them. Not that there's anything wrong with people who, there's a lot of kitten and dog rescues, and I think that's wonderful if you guys can do that. We just find that with like these rodents, rabbits, and guinea pigs and things like that, when they just go to a new home, they don't really stay long or they don't last long. They have
Oh,
shorter
yeah.
life periods. It's too stressful for them or people are like, "Oh, this is way more work," and then they're just back on Craigslist or whatever, getting moved to the next. So when they
How
come
many
to
do you
us,
have?
we have 26 right now. We're licensed to have 40. It's not the daydream that I thought it would be.
Are they in your home or where are they?
No, no. We have they have their full own home in our yard. They have
Oh,
a
perfect.
shed. They have a 100 square foot shed, indoor air conditioned part, and then they have a fully enclosed outdoor area. I call it their wraparound porch, but it's fully enclosed, but they can go outside, but not have to worry about like snakes or anything like that.
Like a
So
dream.
yeah,
Okay.
they love it. They're spoiled. We have one that's in a wheelchair. They need to be in a pretty bad situation for us to take them because it does cost us a lot of money just to operate even healthy guinea pigs. We have one, she's almost 8 years. She might be 8 years old now, but we know she's somewhere between 7.5 and 8 years old. We've had her about 4 years, and most guinea pigs only live to be about 5. So we're doing something
Oh,
right. Usually they come to us where we think they're probably not going to make it past the weekend. And then we're like 3 or 4 years into it.
oh
They're
my
still
God.
kicking it. Yeah, they make me happy. They're so silly. Just like most animals, they all have their own personality. They're very cute. But yeah, there's a lot of poop. There's a lot of poop to clean up all the
Oh,
time. Nobody thinks about that. When you see the cute thing, you don't see the
yes.
gross thing,
We,
so.
we we had 7 chickens. We have an acre, and it's great to get eggs, but we recently rehomed them down the street to the neighbors because,
Mm,
yeah, the poop is. I mean, this is
yep,
like our third cycle of chickens. Love them, but they stink and there's crap
yep.
everywhere. So you don't think about them like, man, I would just rather pay $5 a dozen or whatever it is for eggs instead of
Yep,
cleaning them.
we used to have chickens too, and I lived in an HOA, so I was so shocked that our HOA approved chicken. We just couldn't have
Yeah.
roosters. But yeah, we did that too, and we used to have one that would come in the window and watch TV all the time. If you open the window, it was coming in to watch TV. But yeah,
Wow.
you don't think about how much poop they have. It's just a nonstop cycle of that's all they do.
Yeah.
Great bug control though. If you're
Yes,
people out there who have a bug problem, get a chicken. Like they will they will cure that for
absolutely.
you.
Well, I kind of touched on most subjects I wanted to with you. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, or do you have a social media presence or anything you want to plug?
Yeah, so not really my personal one isn't too accessible. If you look me up, I'm Rumblebee on Instagram. I played roller derby, that was my name at the time.
Right.
So it's Rumblebee, but spelled with 2 threes because my number was 33, so it's B33
B
instead
through
of
three.
yeah. So it's not public, it's private. I just post pictures of my kids, so people
I don't blame
really
you.
need to see that. But you can message me on there. I actually encourage people if you need mental health help. I'm not your therapist, but I can help you find a therapist. So feel free to message me on there. For the festival, you can contact me anytime, anywhere. Wolf Media Festival. We have a website, just wolfmediafest.com. Email is admin@wolfmediafest.com. We have all the social medias are at Wolf Media Fest. You can hit me up there if you're a creative person. We're really trying to encourage people to share their stories and their art and those kind of things. So hit me up. I'm more than happy to help you share your work.
Perfect. And I'll attach all those links in the description on the video. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me this morning and sharing all your insight. You're very fascinating person. I
Thank
loved
you.
this conversation. It was great. I really appreciate you and wish all the best of luck to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.